Gonna be a little froggy today. Hey Booktube, it's Kim at Middle of the Bookmarch, and today is the first video where I recap my books of 2024. This one is the duds of last year. This was a lot easier than it has been in the past. I read far fewer books than I usually do, and I chalk that up to 2024 being a tumultuous, chaotic year, which has now calmed down, so I expect 2025 will be looking up, as the end of 2024 already did. So I only have 3 books that were the most disappointing reads for me last year, but I also have 3 books that I DNF'd that I wanted to talk about because I was so disappointed. So let's get going. I am going to give you the 3 books that I finished that were the duds for me. I read them last year. All 3 of these I did read 100%. And I think I already wrote them down in order of how disappointing they were to me. So the first one is Invisible Labor, The Untold Story of the Caesarean Section by Rachel Summerstein. And I just recently listened to this on audio and reviewed it. This was a disappointing book for me because it was highly slanted towards Caesarean sections are horrible, avoid them at all costs. The reputation is that they're not real birth, that the United States has too high of a statistic of Caesarean sections compared to vaginal births, which could be true. And I believe it's true that the number of Caesarean sections has increased exponentially. However, I, along with my daughter, both birthed one of my daughters and her daughter, my granddaughter, via Caesarean section. And we both had wonderful experiences. Mine was medically necessary. It was an emergency. My daughter's was stalled labor after several hours of pushing. So we both delivered via Caesarean and had very positive experiences. Our recoveries were short and quite easy, minimal medications, and everything went according to plan, and everything went very smoothly. I have many, many friends who have given birth via Caesarean, and I have not spoken to one who has regretted the experience or the decision. Now, that's not to say that there are exceptions, and there are some pretty horrifying experiences of women out there. The author was being prepped for a Caesarean section and was given anesthesia that did not take, so she felt the surgery. She tried to bring that to the doctor's attention, and it was traumatic for her. Totally understandable that she is completely against this surgery unless it is an emergency and medically and absolutely mandatory. But it was very incomplete. It was too anecdotal and not enough science and research. And I was disappointed at the entire book being slanted so far to one opinion. So the title is misleading. The Untold Story of the Caesarean Section. What's untold about this information that she presented? Nothing. It's all been told before. I've heard it all before. So I was disappointed in this one. This is nonfiction. I listened to it on audio. And the narrator, I said this in my review, the narrator's voice did not match the content. So the narrator sounded like she was in a good mood and always smiling. And you can tell when you're listening to a person if they're smiling while they're talking. And that's how she sounded, and it didn't match the content of the book. So that was a little off for me. That was my first disappointment and my most recent read. The next one is another nonfiction. It is Divergent Mind, Thriving in a World That Wasn't Designed for You by Janara Nuremberg. Hopefully my voice won't go 100%. This one is a book about neurodivergence, and my youngest daughter has high-functioning autism. I've talked about that before. And there are other folks in my family who are neurodivergent. And I was really hoping for a very interesting, completely researched book about neurodivergence. And there was a lot of good information in here. However, the majority of the book was about living and working with a neurodivergent mind. And that's not what I signed up for, I guess, when I picked up the book. And wasn't really a complete narrative to me. It was sort of narrative nonfiction, but it's a little short. And I think if you were a millennial age, white, employed woman, this would make a lot of sense for you. But it didn't speak to anything about people of color with autism who are on the job. It didn't talk about lack of opportunities. It didn't talk about what other women and people go through, whether in the workplace or in their personal lives, who have neurodivergent minds. And so this was very incomplete experience for me. I didn't love it. It was a good start, I thought. It was a good start. I do believe the author is neurodivergent. I'm pretty sure. And that's possibly why she wrote the book, is to look more into her experiences as they apply into the world and other people's. So, but that was really disappointing for me. The most disappointing book for me is fiction. It's a novel, and it is Northwoods by Daniel Mason. I had such high hopes for this book. Before I read it, I saw all the reviews. I was so excited to read it. I read a previous book of his, I believe it's The Piano Tuner, and I was really excited to read Northwoods. And I was just really put off by this book. I did not like the format. I thought he was being really too clever. And yes, writers can do that. And I thought that was definitely the case with this book. It's basically an epic story about a house, an old farmhouse in New England, and an apple orchard. And the different generations of people that live in this old house, what they've done to modify it, how do apples play into this story? And there's some other aspects, some maybe miraculous aspects or some magical realisms peppered in there somewhere. I don't want to say too much. But this did not work for me. This was not a Kim book. The characters, the generational characters are all linked, and which normally I would like, but this one didn't work. And it got a little convoluted unnecessarily. I don't know. And I was really disappointed because I had such high hopes, and there were so many glowing reviews of Northwoods on Booktube. And that's the part that bothers me, and I think that's part of my biggest disappointment is when a book like this gets so much press and so many people on Booktube are reading it. It's like, am I going to be afraid of missing out? Do I need to read it? Well, I got it for like $2.99 on Kindle, so I decided to read it. And it just did not work for me. It was disappointing. I was very sad that I didn't like it. I was happy for other people who did. And I moved on from there. So those are the three most disappointing, my three duds of 2024. Now, normally I wouldn't review DNFs, and I don't, but these three were so built up personally for me that I was so looking forward to them, and they fell apart for me, and I DNF'd them. The first one is the Book of Ash, a compilation of novels 1 through 4 by Mary Gentle. This is a fantasy series written a while ago, not a new series. And Ash is a young female mercenary. So who wouldn't want to read about her, that type of character? I was all in. I was dialed in for this. But within the first 10 pages, there were multiple scenes of child rape. And I have certain boundary lines in my reading, and that's one of them. I cannot and could not continue with this book. This was a long one because it was a bind-up of 4 novels in the series. I could not continue. I don't know why she had to describe them so gratuitously in order for the reader to get the point. And that's where I question scenes of sexual violence, rape, or assault in novels is you can you can tell the reader what's happening or what has happened with different language and with different forms of writing. This one was too much for me, and it does speak to the development of the character, but please do it in a different way. I just could not continue. The next one is on a similar topic, is Oryx and Cek by Margaret Atwood. And I started reading this with the band book club that was hosted by MJ of Reading This Life. And I think I might have gotten 25%, 30% through the book. And it was dealing with child sexual assault and pornography. And I couldn't do it. I didn't love the story. I was kind of interested in the characters. It was kind of a dystopian story. And Margaret Atwood does that pretty well. But this one, no. Again, it's that boundary line, my own personal boundary line. And I put it down, and it's the first in a trilogy, and I had all three of them, and I unhauled them because I just did not want to be in that world. The world was too dark for me. And I read dark books, and I read dark stories, but this one was different. It just didn't sit well, so I had to DNF it. The last one, I still have people yelling at me about this book because so many people told me to read it. And I gave it a shot, and I stuck with it for about 150 pages. And this is a long-ass book. It is The Stand by Stephen King. I am sure 100% that I am not a Stephen King fan. And I have read many of his older books, his older works, and I do like his movies. But most of his recent books don't work for me, and it's his style of writing. I'm not a horror writer, I'm not a horror reader, and I'm not a writer of anything either. But I'm not a horror reader, so much of his stuff is maybe on the line of horror, if not psychological horror, contemporary, and that's not for me. I don't like his style. I tried because The Stand is just infamous and one of the longest books, and I just wanted to read it. I don't think I cared about this pandemic story, this disease or whatever it was, this plague. I didn't really want to continue unraveling the number of characters that were in this novel. It was too much. And I'm just not into his writing style. It's just not a Kim book, and I wouldn't pick up another Stephen King novel. I have so many friends that love him, that have read all of his novels. I read several when I was younger and really enjoyed them. But I'm all set. My daughter, my teenager, is now getting into Stephen King. She just read The Shining a little while ago and really loved it. And she has bought several other of his books when we've come across them at used bookstores or library sales. So I know she likes his writing as well. So that's it for me. Those are my duds that I read or didn't read in 2024. Let me know in the comments below what you think of any of these books. And I am sure that a few of these are somebody's favorites out there. They just weren't meant for me. So that's why they were my duds last year. Stay tuned next week because I'm going to start on my best of 2024. There will be the best 4-star reads and then the best of the best coming up. Let me know what you think, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye, everybody.